PDFs will be sent to everybody so they can look at the slides and just read them over before tomorrow, because this part really is about more about tomorrow than it is today.
I have a question about some common plants that are sort of invading the area, and whether any of them are good for the ecosystem or not. Three that I can think of right offhand are the multiflora rose, in some areas the Rosa rugosa, not so much as the multiflora rose, but, and then the Japanese knotweed. They have flowers, and the multiflora rose has seeds, but I'm wondering if they are attracting some of the wrong bees or what.
Right, so they're covered with common. The threatened do not care for them at all. So and honeybees love them too. So you will see tons of activity on the knotweed, and some of the, like loosestrife is another example. Multiflora rose, not so much, not much. Even the common ones don't prefer the multiflora rose. It must be, pollen quality must be really poor. Rugosa, everybody loves. So it's the one that before I'm not one for, if it's good and we don't know what to replace it with, you keep it until we figure it out. And rugosa is one that is a great pollen source, and I would say to put in some native roses, and then when you get the same resource level, then you can start to cut back the non-native to sort of flip it out and work it into the system. But yeah, that's the common. I've heard this before. Well, these non-natives are supplying pollen or nectar. They're bees covering it, and I said, yeah, they're all impatiens and honeybees that don't need our help. And what the problem is that those plants very rapidly choke out and take over native plants. So the knotweed, for example, I was in Chesterfield Gorge riparian meadow, and in just a year, it overtook one of the riparian meadows. And where we had definitely, I observed threatened bumblebees, and there were some rare plants there. It was now just a parking lot of green and covered with the, Bombus impatiens. So it is worth your while to try to cut it back. You'll see the natives come in, or get it out and then put natives in their place in most cases. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, I guess we should just, unless there are more questions, we should move on to the Beecology app.
Right, so we have a couple of minutes. As I said, hopefully everybody's back from break. What I'm going to do is I'll save the overhead slides for the PowerPoint slides for this section, and I will put them in PDF form so you can look them over before tomorrow. So this is sort of a crash. This is I call it Bumblebees 101. It's a crash course in bumblebees. So we'll very quickly learn what is our target in general in terms of what is a bumblebee versus other things. And then the assignment is to go out either now, but the weather's kind of crappy, or tomorrow before we meet, while we meet, to take as many videos as possible of what you think is a bumblebee, and then we'll use that to try to learn species identification. So the bumblebee life cycle, I mentioned this before, there are 4 main phases: the overwintering phase, and then the nesting phase, which is going on right now. So you'll see a lot of very large black and fuzzy things flying around close to the ground and on flowers. Those are the queens. They're trying to find a nest site. Once they do, you'll see them with pollen on their legs. So if you see them with pollen, you know they've got a good nest site in the area and they found a nest, which is great. And they lay eggs. They get pollen, so they need pollen immediately. They lay an egg in the ball of pollen. The eggs hatch. The larvae, eat the pollen, pupate, and we get your first brood of workers coming out. And the queen stays in the hive colony from that point forward. And everything you see in the summer is smaller versions of the queen. Sometimes the queen and the worker looks a bit different, until you get to the end of the season, where you have mating taking place. The mated queen overwinters and everybody else dies. and you start the cycle. So it's an annual cycle. This is what a bumblebee nest looks like. This is one I pulled from my neighbor's backyard and transplanted to my backyard as a Bombus bimaculatus nest. This is what it looks like in the inside. So very much like a honeybee, you've got your queen, division of labor. It's pretty much identical. You can see that the size varies depending on pollen amount, and also the other structures vary in size. Whereas
Are you sharing? You're not sharing your screen from my end.
Yep, that's true. All right, my first problem. It's because I didn't hit the button, not because I have an issue. My issue is my brain.
Uh-oh, it looks like he hit the leave meeting button by mistake.
I can't see the screen either. I wonder if it's Zoom that has
Well, he'll have to log in again.
I'm
Sorry,
trying.
folks. We have a temporary thing where our professor has left the classroom. Now, as I understand, let's talk as long as we're waiting.
Rob, you're muted.
There you are. There you are. You're back.
And you're muted.
Yes, when it rains, it pours. So I hit leave instead of screen share, and it's just it must be the end of the talk because my brain. Okay, so I need to get co-host. If you could give me that, and
Okay, you should have it now.
all righty. So here's the visual for everything I just said, showing you the different life stages. This is a bumblebee nest. So Bombus bimaculatus, it seems, because all four that I've seen this year seem to be in this, are very similar in structure and location. They sort of grab this, they're looking for grass, and they build a dome and things, very interesting. And here's the bumblebee nest. This is Bombus impatiens, the common one. You can see that here are the different, so this is larvae at different stages. When it looks more egg-like, they're ready to close. Here's honey. So bumblebees make honey just like honeybees. They just don't make nearly the same amount. So it's not commercially viable for you to harvest the honey, but it is effectively the same thing. And they have division of labor. So some bees guard the nest, some bees feed the young, some bees forage. Very similar in social structure to honeybees. They don't dance and they don't die when they sting you, which is the main difference. And I talked to a lot of people about those differences. That's one of the questions I get a lot. Okay, the other thing is that each species comes out and has its cycle start and finish at a different time. So this yellow one, Bombus ternarius, which is this one down here, it peaks later in the summer and goes well into the fall. The same with the common Bombus impatiens. Bombus bimaculatus, which is the one you're seeing a lot of now, it actually finishes its cycle. So it's the black one. You see that it is basically gone by the end of August. So you'll see everything up to the end of August, and then things start to drop out. Again, when you plant and what you plant and when it blooms is extremely important. You need to match up to the life cycle, that what's called the phenology of the particular species that you're focused on. All right, so the bumblebee ID 101, the first thing, is it a bumblebee? So here is your bumblebee. This is a Western species, but there are some Eastern look similar. You have three parts, the head, thorax, and abdomen. The abdomen is the rear end. You can see there are different segments. We're going to use the color pattern on the abdomen to help us to ID the species. You can see here's a pollen ball on the pollen basket. The thorax, we're going to use the color of the thorax, and we're also going to use the color pattern in the head. Sometimes there's this yellow, sometimes it's black. This is a long tongue bee, so here's its tongue. You can see it's often bees moving from flower to flower have their tongue sticking out. Looks like an elephant's trunk moving in the wind. And you can see that the color patterns differ. So if we look at abdomen, here it's mostly black, here it's mostly yellow, and here it's about half and half. And that distinction is going to help us to quickly ID these species. So we want to start with the same order, and it's basically matching up color patterns. That's how we're going to learn to ID. And you can get success 95% of the time that way, assuming you have a half-decent video. Now, here's our bumblebees. Here's a male. Males tend to be fuzzier than the workers. But let's compare them to other things that may be confused with the bumblebee. First and foremost, we have our carpenter bee. We have other bees as well. Here's our honeybee. It looks very different, even though it's often depicted as yellow and black. You can see that it's not. It's black and a brown tan color. And the black and yellow fuzzy is all bumblebee, not really honeybee. But black and yellow is certainly a color pattern that's common. The way you tell the difference is that in all of these bees, notice the abdomen is shiny, right? Even in a wasp, it's all shiny. Flies are shiny. Different bees, looking at that yellow and black are degrees of shiny. Not always the case, but the vast majority of times it's the case. These ones are always fuzzy. So when you see fuzz all the way through the abdomen, you know you've got a bumblebee. Other tells, here's a moth that is mimicking a bumblebee. It's called the bumblebee moth. Notice it's yellow and black and has got a long tongue and is a beautiful thing to see, foraging, loves Monarda. And so that one's pretty easy, but what's more difficult, the flies. This fly is kind of easy, but this is actually a fly, not a bumblebee. And so how do we tell? It's actually eating a honeybee. And so what we see, the flies have small antennae, they have 2 wings instead of 4, and you see that their feet, quote unquote, are like pads instead of hooks, like in the bumblebees. That allows them to hook onto flowers, and the flies can't do that. But there are very, very good fly mimics out there, and they often mimic the most abundant species that you see. Bumblebee species that you see. And that's, again, if we want to bring this into evolution and convergence and mimicry and bringing in those concepts, you can use the bumblebee mimics and bumblebees and try to get students to figure out the difference between the two. Okay, so what I want you to do, I was hoping it would be nice this afternoon, and it is not. So when we get in, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go around with our device. Cell phones are good, but you can use iPads or cameras, whatever you want to use, that can take a 10 to 15-second video of what you think is a bumblebee visiting a flower. And the 10 to 15 seconds, the reason we do this is because we want to look at the behavior. We're going to look at the behavior, and we can get all the information we need to ID the species. So what we're going to do, and what the app does, is you bring the video into the app and you go frame by frame and you stop it when you have a good shot of the abdomen, a good shot of the thorax, and a good shot of the head. And with that information, the app will help you to put it together to figure out the bumblebee species. And you also use those stills to log the plant species, the flower it's visiting, and the video to log the behavior. So taking a good video is critical. Here, you stand about a foot away with autofocus, and just let it run until the bee, you may get it to visit a couple of flowers, and it may seem like it's moving quickly, but we're going to be slowing it down with the app frame by frame. So what may seem like you don't get it, you actually are able to get important information. And you can replay the video at slow speed to see if you can get the color of the head, the face, the thorax, and the abdomen. And so with that information, then we're then going to turn to use the web app. And what I want to do now is just show you where the web app is. And there's a tutorial on the web app that I want you to go through for tomorrow. And we spent a lot of time trying to make the tutorial self-contained, so it will walk through exactly what you need to do. And from my perspective, I want you to go through it so you can say, well, I was really stuck on this step. It needs work. I can go back to the CT people, computer science, the technicians, and say, we need to work on this. Or my students can work on language to get it to the point where it's easy for you to use the app following the 6 steps. Okay, and we'll end with that. So to get to the app, what we want to do, first of all, is we want to go to Let me get rid of my screen share thing here. So we want to go to beecology.wpi.edu. So this is the main Beecology website. We're going to talk about other components. But if you are on a laptop, let me move this out of the way. All you have to do is hover over the top bar and you'll see Webapp. If you're on a phone, when you go to the site, you want to go to the menu. So the menu will be on the top left or top right, and it's what's called a hamburger menu. So it's 4 or 5 lines, black lines. You click on that, and the last option is going to be web app. Okay? So the difference between a web app and a regular app is a web app, all you need is a functional browser in order to use it. It does not matter if you have an iPhone or an Android. When we started this, we were going to make 2 versions, and it was expensive and time consuming. We can now use the web app. We can very quickly make changes to both iPhone and Android versions, right? Because it's happening through the browser. So we make one change that affects both things. And so we think it's a much better way of doing things. So the first thing you should see is welcome to Beecology Webapp version 4.0. So by the way, the other apps, you have to go to an app store and download them, and they're device specific. So this is browser specific. You go to a website and you can use it through the website versus going to app stores. And it's free as well. It's another big thing. Okay, so version 4.0, you want to view tutorial. Once you click that, you're going to see, just read through and follow the steps. How do you upload a video? How then are you going to identify your bee using the video? And it shows you how to use the video editing tools, gives you some examples to get right through to submitting the log. So as your homework, and you could even take a video of anything, just go through the steps to try to go through the process. Maybe what I'll do is send a video. If you can't take videos because of the weather and you don't have any videos, maybe I can send a video along as well that everybody can practice IDing a bee in a video. If you think that would be useful, I can send that along with the PowerPoint slides for this section. The very least, just go through the different steps so that we're ready for tomorrow. Now, once we go through the app, or you can do this independent of the app and going through the video based on the ID sheet that I've given you, we're going to try to ID species. So what you want to do, and this is what the app does. So in the class, when you're trying to, conceptually, you're covering major principles in app design just by doing a sorting exercise or forming a dichotomous key, or you can do simple activities that help students to understand what core element the app needs to help people to ID. The first thing is order. It is extremely important that you always start with the abdomen color pattern first. I know it's difficult. People jump to the thorax or jump to the head, but with the abdomen, knowing the abdomen, you have eliminated the vast majority of species right out of the gate, just with that. And the thorax comes into play in the head to fine tune things a little bit. So you start with the head and then the thorax and then the abdomen. Again, when I say head and face, here's the bumblebee face. There's the top of the head, and then the face is the area in here. This is yellow in males often and black in females, but that's not always the case. And on the ID sheet that I've given you, which is a version of this sheet, this is for workers, but you can see some of the workers, which are female, have yellow faces in both the workers and the males. Okay, these are the species that were historically present. But we're going to be using these color patterns. These cartoons are in the app, right? So you want to try to use the cartoons to ID, and then here are some examples that you could use. So you could actually try to ID these species, whether they're, what's the species and are they workers or males, using the cheat sheet that I gave you, the Bumblebee ID sheet. So if you don't have time for the app and you can't get a video, you could do this exercise instead to help to prepare you. All right, so if we did have a video, let's just take a look at a video. So this is again in Western Mass. This is our threatened Bombus terricola. Notice it's biting a hole. It's not this flower. You remember we saw the Fervidus go in this way? Here's its tongue. It's biting a hole and robbing this flower down here. So that right away tells us it's got to be Fervidus or Aphanus, because other bees don't, they exploit holes already made, but they don't make their own holes. But if we continue with the video and we scrub through, we want to stop the video at various points. There's a beautiful shot of the abdomen. So we can narrow down our choices there. We can then look at the thorax, right? Now, we can also look at the head and see what color the face is. So here we can kind of see, there might be a shot there, and you just scrub through until you can see. The question is whether is the face black or yellow. And so we can see it here, and we see that it's black. This would be as yellow as the back yellow that we saw if it was a male. So we know that it's a worker Bombus terricola. The other way we can tell is males do not collect pollen. So based on the behavior and this fact that there's pollen here, this tells us it's a worker, all right? And so the app's going to walk you through, and you can scrub and do what I'm doing on the computer. You can do all this, and in fact, you can do it better on the app. So the male, female, here's a yellow face, what I'm talking about. It looks like a mustache and a beard, versus the female face, which is black versus yellow. There are other tells as well. Only females sting. Here's the stinger. Hopefully you can see it sticking out here. So in females, they've got a point at the end where the stinger comes out. In males, it's flat, because the male has a reproductive organ and clamps on to the female, the queen, and hangs on for dear life as he's transferring pollen to that female. The last thing is it collecting nectar and pollen? And this is good. I'll point this out tomorrow. I'm not sure if we'll see pollen, but certainly with nectar, it's very easy to see nectar. The bee basically, you can see its proboscis, and it walks along and pokes its head into the flower and stops for a brief second. So on an open flower like this goldenrod, you can see it just walking and poking its head in. When we get more complicated, here's our Bombus terricola, where you can see that when it's getting in to get the nectar, it remains motionless for a brief second. Let me scrub to get to a half decent part. So you can see here that it stops. It's stopping while it ingests the nectar, and all bees do that. The more nectar, the longer they're motionless. Or you can see their little abdomens pumping to suck up the nectar. When we look at pollen, and here's another thing that bees, a lot of people say, oh, bees don't visit red flowers. Well, here's an example of something in the reds. This is another bee that's you should be seeing, Bombus borealis, a long-tongued bee, very similar to Bombus fervidus, on a monarda, and you can see it sticking its head in, and it's remaining motionless once its head's in there. Okay, I think I have another. Oh, this is Bombus terricola nectar robbing, so it's not going in like Bombus borealis. It's robbing the same flower. For the sake of time, I want to show you pollen. Now, in pollen collecting, the bee runs over the top of the flower very quickly, and you're going to hear it going zzz, 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 as it's running over very quickly moving over the top of the flower. It doesn't remain motionless, and it makes a lot of noise. On other flowers, you're going to see it doing a little dance. So here's our bee down here. You can see it running around the top of the flower very quickly, kicking up the pollen. You can see the pollen on its legs as well. But that's another typical pollen collecting behavior. So there's the buzz sound for buzz pollinating and kicking up the pollen. There's a running around the top. Those behaviors tell you it's pollen versus nectar, and I'm hoping we're going to see some of those behaviors tomorrow so you can take videos and see them in real life, or see them firsthand. Lastly, what plant species is it visiting? So this is, we're building this into the app. So we've got a lot of species. We're going to build this into the app where you can narrow down the choices and come up with the right species. We may even incorporate elements from things like Seek, Plant Finder, Plant.net, these apps that are free and available, iNaturalist, that you can use to ID the plant and then get that information into the app. So that, starting this off, I thought that everybody's going to be a gardener and know the plants, and then I realized, well, there are a lot of plants and there are variants of plants, and so we're going to build that into the app in future. Hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have a plant ID part of the app as well. So you've got different shapes and different things as well, which I'll talk about tomorrow. So the second thing, and we'll try to do this tomorrow, is to log 5 bumblebee species and 5 plant species. As I mentioned, there should be 10 out there, so getting 50% of them should be easy. But we'll see what we can do tomorrow. So the hunt is on to do that. Tomorrow I'll talk about looking for relationships between things like tongue length and color in plants, and using our technology and our tools online when I talk about the curriculum in the afternoon. Okay, so with that, I'm happy to stick around. I apologize for going late. As I said, it's my first, I tend to talk anyway, it's my first run and I didn't have a sense of time. But I'll stick around to answer any questions if you have time. You can email me with questions, and you can certainly ask me questions tomorrow in the morning or the afternoon. So thank you very much for attending part 1, and hopefully you found it useful at some level. And I will pass.
Thank you very much. That's really, I'm going to have to grab my camera real quick. And this time get close-ups. The one thing I'd add that I always forget to do is that iPhones tend to focus on what it thinks is has the most lines in it. And if you touch the place on the screen where the bee is, it will autofocus on the bee.
Oh.
Right. So at some point in that process, if you can zoom out so that you can get a fairly clear shot of the flower, we use that information. So what happens is when things get logged, if something is incorrect, I change it, either the bee or the flower. And you can actually submit the video this year. You couldn't do that in past years. So I can look at the video if you submit it and make any corrections. So anyway, but that's a good point. It takes a bit of practice.
Is there, a lot of cameras have, well, the phones don't, but other cameras have video formats, or other cameras have different formats. Is there a preferred?
No, as far as I know, our app will accept any video. And if we find one that it doesn't, then I'll talk to the IT team and they can fix it quickly. So any video you should be able to upload. What'll happen is that when it says upload video or capture frame from a video, you can, it'll take you to your files and you can pull the video and you should see it. And if you have any trouble, let me know what the file extension is or the format is, and I'll pass that along. Am I muted?
Nope, no, we can hear
Okay.
you. People are checking out, looking at the group chat. People are saying so long, and looking forward to tomorrow. And everybody has the date about where to meet tomorrow.
Yes, I believe Pam passed that along to everybody. I think. I hope.
Yeah, it's in the email. It was in the original email. And for the Zoom tomorrow afternoon, it is the same address, same station, no difference in the. I logged it as an ongoing meeting. Now, if you want to see this video, wish me luck. Zoom has to convert them, and then I have to upload them, and hopefully YouTube will not say you can't upload anything larger than 10 minutes, which sometimes it wants to say. And but we'll figure it out one way or another. So thank you.